The studio behind Pokémon Snap and Smash Bros. Went bankrupt, making the most ambitious 8-bit game. This disaster was approved by Satoru Iwata, who would one day run Nintendo. And if it never happened, we'd never have Kirby, or the Wii, or the Nintendo that we know today. This is the story of HAL Laboratory and their gorgeous train wreck, Metal Slader Glory. It's a game that I'm obsessed with, but have a really hard time recommending. I'm Scoutmaster Demi, and this is a deeper dive. Our story begins in 1980. HAL Laboratory is formed with a handful of employees, including part-time programmer Satoru Iwata. They'd one day have a strange logo, a dog with eggs that symbolizes, and I quote, an unexpected bond, where something new is born. There's a few fun stories behind the studio's name. It was partly inspired by the film 2001: A Space Odyssey, which has a computer named HAL, but each letter of HAL also put them one step ahead of IBM. It's silly, but this small Japanese team aimed to be greater than a multinational tech company. It says everything about their ambition. At first, HAL was focused on computers, but in 1983, something huge occurred. Nintendo had released their legendary Famicom, and it was a smash hit that changed gaming forever. HAL Laboratory was among the many developers who wanted a slice of the Famicom pie, and with Mr. Iwata's expert programming, they came out swinging with 3 games. Pinball had excellent physics. The programming was so good that Pokémon Pinball used the same code over a decade later and on the Game Boy, but Iwata himself was more proud of golf. He had managed to fit 18 courses into a small memory file. According to him, Nintendo very much wanted a golf game on the Famicom, but no other company could promise 18 courses. Golf was the game that made Nintendo notice Mr. Iwata and his impressive programming. But it was F1 that was the most successful. This racing game had special visuals which gave the sensation of speed and the illusion of distance. Mr. Iwata programmed this effect, and the result was a game that sold 1.5 million copies in its lifetime. This was achieved in part with the growing overseas market. The Famicom had expanded to North America and Europe and was rebranded as the NES, and a bigger market meant more reason for HAL to make games. You might recognize Balloon Fight. Villager in Smash Bros. Flies the same way, and the song gets remixed all the time. That was a HAL exclusive. The Eggerland games by them are also worth mentioning. The character Lolo became HAL's mascot in these years before Kirby, and Mr. Iwata brought ports of arcade classics to the Famicom like Millipede and Defender 2, all thanks to his programming skills. We should note a few other games by HAL Laboratory too. What do Gal Force, Fire Bam, and a math game for 5-year-olds have in common? Well, Fire Bam has a speedrunning scene, which is kinda crazy, but the real answer is they were all worked on by Yoshimiru Hoshi. He is the heart and soul of Metal Slader Glory, the game that would bankrupt HAL Laboratory, so let's talk more about him. Mr. Hoshi, otherwise known online as Star Yoshimiru, was a freelance artist. He illustrated his own manga called Akutenso Fixalia that got cancelled before the story ended. He also drew instruction manuals for Gunpla mech figures. Though he wasn't much of a gamer, it was through his freelance jobs that Mr. Hoshi discovered and fell in love with video game animation. You see, in the 80s, traditional animation was a ton of work. According to Mr. Hoshi, up until then, we had to draw everything by hand, and if you wanted to animate, you had to draw onto paper, transfer it to cells, color it, and burn it to film before you'd be able to view it on a CTR. But here, you could draw directly onto the computer and view it immediately. That was really fascinating to me. Now granted, you had to learn programming and use technical tools, but it was worth it to view your art in real time. At least that's what Mr. Hoshi felt. He fell in love with video game animation and its untapped potential. potential. He combined parts of his manga story with his mecha illustrations to create something special, something unique to him and his sensibilities. Meanwhile, Mr. Iwata got promoted to head director of development for his accomplishments in programming. On a fateful day in 1987, Satoru Iwata was walking by a monitor and saw a game being tested. The animation looked far more advanced than anything a Famicom should be able to produce. The game was designed to be a pitch for the company, but Mr. Iwata was so impressed that he greenlit the project right then and there. That game was Metal Slader Glory, and like a canon event, this would seal the fate of Iwata, Hoshi, HAL Laboratory, and all of Nintendo. From the very beginning, Metal Slader Glory was not your average game. It's a visual novel based on a special program called Adventure Game Language, or AGL. This would form the game's foundation, so while it was being built, Mr. Hoshi got straight to work. I should mention that other than programming and composing the music, he did everything else. He wrote the script, he designed and animated the characters and the settings, he created flowcharts and even made the sound effects. He was a director during the earliest days of making video games when that role was barely defined. Mr. Hoshi was also not an employee of HAL Laboratory. Remember, he was a freelancer. He'd be paid royalties on Metal Slader Glory's sales, and to make ends meet, he lived with his parents at the time. Still, he wasn't bitter about that. That arrangement is likely what allowed MSG to be made, and Hoshi would have done anything for his creation. When asked about his time at HAL Laboratory, he said this: "It might be a strange way to explain it, but top down is the phrase that comes to mind. Iwata was ever present, and he always looked out for his employees. In fact, no one ever attempted to change his vision. Mr. Hoshi did all of his own censorship, which is crazy considering what he left in. I can't wait to talk about that later on and can only wonder just how unhinged the original script was. In any case, Metal Slader Glory is most known for its visuals. The team used a digitizer device that could convert a drawing into crude pixels, which could then be refined into something prettier. The biggest hurdle was the Famicom itself. It was limited in palette colors and tile space, but with some creativity, these challenges could be overcome. Unfortunately, these solutions also took precious time. Metal Slader Glory started development in 1987 and would not be released until 1991. That's 4 years of development time, which was unheard of. To put that in perspective, Battle of Olympus on the NES was finished in 6 months, and it was made by 3 people. It took so long for Metal Slader Glory that the Super Famicom had come out by then. The team discussed porting over MSG to it, but ultimately HAL Laboratory stuck with the Famicom. Funny enough, the game would eventually get a Super Famicom release and be the last game officially released on that system, but more on that later. Let's talk about the game. With all this history, I just had to try Metal Slader Glory for myself. This first part is spoiler-free, then you can decide if you want my full experience by checking the timestamps. Oh, and you may have heard me say MSG a few times. Obviously, that means Metal Slader Glory because it's kind of a mouthful, but it's also kind of an unfortunate acronym. Okay, odds are you have played an 8-bit NES game. They're basic and they're short. If they have cutscenes, and that's being pretty generous with the term, they're static images that have text to read. Also, music in this era tended to be pretty simple with a few famous exceptions. Metal Slader Glory was not what I expected because it is none of those things. It is surreal to see detailed settings with animated movement. There are cinematic shots that stuck with me, like the green light that bathes in the cockpit in space. There are genuine, actual cutscenes, and I'll show you my favorite in a little bit. The story is both grand and also deeply personal, and it takes its time to unfold with perfect pacing when I'm sure there was a ton of developmental pressure to speed things up. It's incredible the game got made the way that it did. Characters here are at the front and center, and when they aren't, we get portraits that show their many different expressions. Lips move as they speak, and they have a different alternating sound which gives the illusion of an actual conversation. These also have 3 different characters that all have a unique sound as their text scrolls. I mean, come on, there are visual novels in the year 2025 that don't have this flavor. glare. It goes such a long way towards making me, the player, care about what's happening on the screen. Then there's the music. Sometimes it's super catchy and other times it's eerie and atmospheric. And the characters themselves have unique theme songs. Have you ever heard of a leitmotif? That's when a smaller piece of music represents someone or something. And because of that, this small piece of music gets repeated and remixed in different ways to make the listener think about what's happening. For example, you might first hear a song in an upbeat manner, but then later on it might slow down for a sad moment, or maybe it speeds up for an intense part of the game. And as you keep hearing these variations, it glues itself to your mind and it takes on a new level of importance. Well, this 8-bit game has leitmotifs in its soundtrack. This game is also so good that there is an official soundtrack released for this chiptune style, and it also includes the demo tracks that were made with it. Metal Slader Glory is also unique in that it shows off the demo music that was played, which is a really rare thing in this world. That's what let the chiptune programmers actually make the music in it. Now, most games on the Famicom and the NES used passwords to restore your data, as the vast majority of them didn't have save batteries. Metal Slader Glory is the same way, and while you can't save anytime you want to, it does play with passwords in an innovative way. When a chapter is finished, Elena, who is your female partner, will ask you if you'd like to take a rest. If you do, she'll give you a simple password to restore your data, like Dallas or Hudson. That's pretty different than most passwords at the time, which were a huge chain of gibberish icons. But then it struck me, Metal Slader Glory doesn't have any items, so they can just have simple passwords for each chapter. The game is both linear, but also has some branching paths, so there are a few different passwords that represent that as well. Yes, if it wasn't clear by now, Metal Slader Glory was only released in Japan, so I ordered a replica NES cartridge with an English fan translation. I've corresponded with Peter Bernard, the game's translator, and he's been an absolute gem. I was curious about the names of these passwords he used, and he basically told me that in the original game, because you could combine so much information into smaller Japanese characters, you could basically talk about the game itself in terms of what was actually happening. For example, one password might literally translate to, "Let's try going to see a mechanic," but in English that would be really long and mouthy. So instead he opted in for some fun localization choices. Like, of course, Elena would love 80s sci-fi movies, so she's gonna give you those for the passwords. I know there might be some purists out there who wish we had a more literal, accurate password system, but personally, I kind of love this touch. So who is Elena? She's one of the three main characters. You play as Tadashi, a mechanic who stumbles upon the mysterious mecha of the game. His little sister is Azusa, and his girlfriend is Elena. The mecha that they find is named Glory, and when he boots it up, Tadashi hears an ominous message: Earth is in danger, seek the creator. The game planned on a more elaborate intro, but to save time and money, Mr. Hoshi drew a short manga to set up the world that was included in the instruction manual. This was also translated, and I'll link it here. Just be warned, it's a little pervy. Remember at the start of the video how I said it's hard to recommend Metal Slader Glory? That's in part because English translations aren't the easiest thing to play, but it's mostly because of the game's content. Depending on how you play it, Tadashi can be a full-on menace, hitting on women, sometimes literally. And yeah, there is a famous or infamous shower scene. Most of this stuff is optional and avoidable, though sometimes it's not. But the worst part for me was a particular moment that I am not going to discuss out loud, but I'll just let you read about it in this interview, where even the interviewer himself was surprised. Now, look, if this were a modern game, I would severely criticize it because Metal Slader Glory is so good and none of the fan service was necessary or even expected. It's not marketed or presented as an ecchi game, but Metal Slader Glory is also a product of its time. It was made in a different country with a different culture, and it's over 30 years old. So if you do play it, and I really do love this game, I hope you do, just think of it as a time capsule. In fact, I want to redeem this game a bit and show you one of my absolute favorite scenes that happens about 10 minutes on in the game. Feel free to skip ahead and beware of the flashing lights, but if you watch this with an open mind, you might just be surprised. Yes, even retro video games can be art. Okay, I'm diving deep into Metal Slader Glory, so this is your last chance to avoid spoilers, okay? Cool. We'll start with the instruction manual, which gives us the background on the world and a short manga story that sets up the game. Metal Slader Glory is set 70 years in the future in the year 2062. Our story takes place in a world recovering from a period of conflict. Over the last 8 years, the Earth has once again become peaceful and prosperous. But as Tadashi discovered, that may soon be coming to an end. As a side note, the story takes place during the summer break, which is why Azusa is able to accompany Tadashi on his adventure. In the world of Metal Slader Glory, space travel isn't the difficult and dangerous undertaking it is today. Several entertainment and tourist spots have been built on the moon, and orbital colonies have sprung up throughout the solar system. All of these are tied together by a network of regular interstellar shuttles. Even Azusa, an elementary school student, jumps at the idea of seeing the stars up close. In the year 2040, machines that run on fossil fuels, such as diesel engines and gas turbines, were banned from use on the Earth. Renewable energy such as solar and water power were introduced, however, they were completely unable to satisfy the planet's energy needs. This, coupled with the fact that heavy machinery manufacturers were falling on hard times, led to the creation of a new research agency on the moon called the ISDC. Research at the ISDC soon bore fruit. Building on existing technology, they were able to create man-bipedal robots with sophisticated cybernetic limbs, powered by tough resin-treated outer plating and able to run entirely on solar power. This new breed of super lightweight robots were soon called Metal Gear Arms. Over the following decades, these robots were further strengthened and adapted for military use. These new weapons were christened Metal Sladers, the perfect weapon in a world where energy was becoming more and more of a concern. Each model of Metal Slader has its own nickname and number. The titular Glory is just as its name implies, a high-performance machine created for a singular, noble purpose. So, Tadashi and his girlfriend Elena are mechanics, but the recent mech they bought is a junker. They hit up the dealer Gen, who has a replacement for them. Also, Azusa, Tadashi's sister, has graduated from her class. We're just gonna skip this bath scene. And here we get a flashback to Tadashi's father taking care of his kids. There's a picture of their mother, but she's nowhere to be seen. Tadashi's dad has to work on the moon, which means he's involved with the research agency that's there. He tells his son to take care of Azusa, then we jump back to the present. Gen brought the beat-up robot, and Tadashi tries it out, but suddenly, weird lights flash, and a mysterious message appears. Earth is in danger. Seek the creator. The robot had a cloaking device, and when Tadashi entered it, its true form is revealed. A Metal Slader, which is a war machine. We get to see this scene in the video game too. Feeling uneasy about this purchase, Tadashi goes back to Gen to get some answers. Gen thinks he bought the robot from Colony 35 and suggests that they head to space to investigate themselves. He'll even let them borrow his freight ship and drive them to the airport in an iconic scene. Gen's a pretty good guy. The trio head off into space and begin their investigation. Tadashi boards Glory again and discovers a data disk that's there, but they don't know how to read it. Folks keep commenting that Glory has a distinct smell too. Some people like it, while others don't. Eventually, they find a mechanic to help them listen to the disc, but Azusa records over it by accident, saying how much she loves her big brother. But soon, the investigation starts running into dead ends. The leader of the orbital station is named Jiff, and he's not very helpful. There was a war from 8 years ago, but the info was restricted, and the Slader they now own is a famous model named Glory that was used in the war, but not much is known about it either. They decide to travel to Colony 35, which might have some more answers since that's where Gen bought Glory in the first place. They meet with the colony's leader, a mysterious woman named Silkien, but neither her nor her assistant secretary, Sayoko, have much info to share. The group travels to the moon as well, since that's where the research station is. They learn that a man named Vivace created Metal Slader Glory, and with some brain power, they see the connection with a restaurant. At first, I thought it was a plot hole that the team didn't make the Vivace connection right away, but this is actually a language joke that's hard to translate. In the original, they'd read Vivace in Japanese characters, and then they'd see the sign in English, which doesn't sound the way that it's spelled. But in this English translation, they read and see it all in English, so it doesn't quite work out. Also, there's this moment where you have to call for a waitress, and you have to actually wait to see her before you can ask. I really love this small detail. Tadashi and Elena ask the waitress about Vivace, and after enough grilling, she fesses up. The waitress looks terrified, but when she hears who Tadashi's dad is, she draws a quick map on a napkin and tells them to hurry quickly to Colony 35. As the group departs, they feel a crash on their ship. They check on Azusa, who is talking to a quiet young kid they've never seen before. He won't answer any of Tadashi's questions, so Elena gives it a try. But then everything changes. The kid reveals itself to be a horrifying creature. It snatches Azusa and flies into space while Tadashi and Elena are speechless. The first thing the couple does at Colony 35 is report Azusa missing. They tell Sayoko about it, and I love how the game portrays Elena filling out the report at the same time as Tadashi awkwardly chatting up the beautiful secretary. After that, Tadashi and Elena head out to solve their map. They encounter a burger stand that seems to be their spot, and after some hustling with a worker girl, she soon changes their tune and invites them all inside. It turns out this is a secret base full of Sladers. Caddy is the worker girl's name, and she's called Chief by Enkai, who is a young but nervous man. The two soldiers explain the meaning of Glory's message that Earth is in danger. Seek the creator. The alien that stole Azusa is part of a shape-shifting race that has been waging war against humanity. In fact, the war from 8 years ago was said to be a rebellion among all the colonies, but this was in fact a cover-up. The government was afraid to reveal the frightening truth, and in fact, it's suspected that the aliens have infiltrated the government, which makes information really difficult to gain and explains their investigative dead ends. It's hard to trust anyone now, so the resistance is hiding underground, trying to learn more about their mysterious foes, but Tadashi could be their hope. You see, Vivace was the brilliant scientist who managed to lead this rebellion. The aliens did kill him, but before he died, he made Metal Slader Glory specifically for Tadashi's father. Vivace did not want Glory to be misused as it hides a special secret, so only Tadashi's father could pilot it. Since both men are dead, however, Glory became unable to function. But Tadashi triggers the scanner since he looks like his dad. It's still not clear what the secret of Glory is, but Caddy hands them a special disc to use in an emergency. This was given to her by Vivace. After all, Tadashi is the last man on Earth who can operate Vivace's greatest creation. Tadashi agrees to help, but first they need to rescue Azusa. Elena and Tadashi leave, and as they do, they learn that Azusa is in Colony 3 from Sayoko, the secretary. The two could leave right away, but they decide to go back and ask Caddy for help. This is a pretty famous section where you negotiate with Caddy using this huge list of commands, some of which are pretty sus. Depending on how you do, the party for Colony 3 has several computations, but I think canonically it makes more sense that Caddy joins your party. She also mentions how Colony 3 is decayed and it was never really a strategic part of the war. That means it's likely a trap, so she provides the team with a bunch of weapons for protection. The crew lands on the abandoned Colony 3. The backup generator bathes the team in red. There's a door that won't open, but after some knocking and noise, it opens suddenly and reveals Jif. He offers to take you to Azusa, but regardless of your choice, Jif reveals his true colors. He was indeed an alien. The team fires on Jif, but he gets away, leaving you alone in the spooky red corridors. This part of the game is genuinely terrifying. It's the first time you can see your own movement as you walk through these circular loops in Colony 3. It makes you feel like anything can jump out at any moment. There are a bunch of loops that have some doors on the left. Most of these doors are locked, but some are open. You investigate these rooms by pointing your finger at different objects. With enough traversing, you encounter alien Jif again. This time you defeat him and find the card key on his alien body. With enough searching and investigating, you eventually find Azusa trapped behind a metal grate. Her pendant broke, so the smell of perfume is everywhere, but other than needing rest, she's surprisingly okay. The group heads back into space, feeling quite proud of themselves, but they soon get a distress signal. Colony 35 is under attack. The Resistance does have a backup plan for when their base is destroyed, so they head to what's called the Dark Area. But when they approach it, it's actually a massive ship called the T-Stork that's been hidden on the dark side of Colony 35. Miss Silkien is the commander, and she has 60 Metal Sladers on it. But before they can move forward, Caddy and Enkai speak up. Their base was hidden for so long, but just now it's been compromised. That means someone here on the ship is a traitor. After some thinking, it can only be Sayoko, since she saw the burger stand to deliver the news about Azusa, and her having that news was suspicious in itself. Suddenly, Azusa comes out from her bed rest. This whole time, she felt like Glory was familiar to her, but now she finally remembers. Her dad was dying inside Glory's cockpit, and he pressed some buttons while he asked Azusa to speak. This traumatic moment was a memory sealed away by Azusa that finally was awakened. However, Sayoko smells the perfume and gets disgusted. It reveals her true form as an alien, which means the perfume that Tadashi's mother made is one surefire way to tell who was a friend and who was a foe. Sayoko escapes, and a massive alien spaceship appears. It destroys Colony 35 in an instant, and it shoots out aliens that start flying towards the T-Stork. It's go time for the Resistance. Tadashi grabs Glory, and even Elena joins in with the Slader. She refuses to be left behind in this emergency. This part of the game is brand new as you defend yourself from the alien onslaught. There's different enemies that require different tactics, and it's incredibly tense. As you continue to defend yourself, the alien mothership launches a huge attack on the T-Stork. In desperation, Tadashi uses the special disc. It launches a password system, but after some thinking, he realizes he can use Azusa's voice recording from way earlier to trigger it, about her saying she loves her brother. In a way, it was the power of Tadashi's family and his love that lent the team its final trump card. As the mothership charges up one last move, Metal Slader Glory strikes with the ultimate weapon and saves the day. When I first played this, I had no idea if Tadashi would survive. That's true of so many moments too. Metal Slader Glory kept me on my toes as the gameplay kept changing and the scenario kept growing. It's a visual novel, yes, but it's also a frightening thriller and a very tense sci-fi game. And I love all the small details like the lack of a name for the alien race. It makes them so much more mysterious and scary. Their shape-shifting powers make you question everyone you meet from then on. There was even a part of me that suspected Elena, since her backstory is less fleshed out, and what a twist that would be. Plus, she seems to know English a lot better than the others. But no, I love that she's just your steadfast companion, and it's sweet that Tadashi does live. The final scene after the credits is a portrait of the family whose love for each other saved humanity. Top notch. And you know, we have to thank the incredible translator who made this possible. We all know that games in that 80s and 90s era had many typos. It's almost better this way, that Metal Slader Glory can be played in English by a team that respected it. Peter Bernard, the translator I mentioned earlier, talked about the enduring legacy of this game that drew him to it. In Japan, this is the Famicom game. It's a holy grail that's proudly displayed in video game stores. That sort of notoriety appealed to Peter at a time when he was seeking a fun project. A salute to you, my friend, and all of your incredible work. Scouts, if you can take a minute to thank Peter in the comments, that would be just incredible. He deserves it. There's also a chance that he might localize the Super Famicom version of the game called Metal Slader Glory Director's Cut. It was released by downloading it on special Nintendo Power cartridges. It came out near the end of the year 2000, meaning the Nintendo 64 was already out and the GameCube was announced and on the horizon. If I had $1 for every time this game came out at the tail end of a console, I'd have $2. For what it's worth, the Director's Cut looks surprisingly similar to the original. It adds some new scenes and removes some censorship, but for whatever reason, the soundtrack is totally different. Let's just say that there's a reason there's no CD album for the Super Famicom version. But as for the original game on the Famicom, that Metal Slader Glory was a commercial failure. To its credit, it sold every copy that was made, but Nintendo was unable to supply enough MMC5 chips to give the game a bigger print run. This special chip is what gave the game its graphical push. What's sad is that MSG could have been achieved with the more common MMC3 chip, which could do just about everything except for parallax scrolling. But even if they had the right chips, Metal Slader Glory received a mixed score of 23 out of 40 from Famitsu magazine. My best guess for this is that the existence of the Super Famicom meant that reviewers were less likely to be impressed with the graphics, but that also can't be the whole story because Kirby's Adventure would release even later in 1993, also by HAL Laboratory, and score a 33 out of 40. But regardless, the 4 years of Metal Slader's development caused a vicious cycle for for HAL Laboratory. According to Mr. Iwata, it went like this: we didn't have enough time, so we released games before they were really finished and ready for release. Then those games wouldn't sell very well because they weren't very good, which puts us in an even more desperate position for our next development. Obviously, this wasn't going to work, and the only way to break out of this cycle was to create a proper game, something that would garner the support of players. But as developers, the whole situation had taken a big toll on our morale. But HAL Laboratory's relationship with Nintendo was strong. Great figures like Shigeru Miyamoto recognized that HAL made quality and profitable games and were working hard since the earliest days of the Famicom. So when HAL was in debt, Nintendo rescued them under the condition that Satoru Iwata be made president of HAL. That might sound like a weird stipulation, but perhaps it isn't. In this day and age, we understand just how incredible Mr. Iwata truly was. A genius programmer and a kind and thoughtful CEO. He innovated so much in Nintendo, and even in the failure of Metal Slader Glory, he had this to say: very few copies were produced and put in circulation. For that fact alone, I can't really praise it. But on the other hand, there's a lot of people that continue to love this game, and I think that's due to all the energy and love we poured into its development. That's something I can be very happy about. So, HAL Laboratory went from financial ruin to a first-party developer for Nintendo, all because of Metal Slader Glory. With this new relationship, they were able to leave marketing and sales to Nintendo and focus solely on making great games, which they did. The Kirby series in particular launched them right back into the stratosphere with millions of copies sold. HAL Laboratory is a comeback story that defies expectation, and on that note, I feel the same way about my love for Metal Slader Glory, that this strange little gem defies expectation. On a personal note, I've been emotionally drained these past 2 months. Ever since the California fires burned my home and my collection, I've been pretty uninterested in rebuilding it. But this game made such an impression on me that I bought a mini replica of Metal Slader Glory. To me, it's a symbol of perseverance and a reminder that not every success is measured by materials. At least that's how Yoshimiru Hoshi feels. Despite it all, he treats it as his life's work. Despite the poor sales and low royalties, he treats this game as his life's work. I suppose there's worse things in life than chasing glory. I'm Scoutmaster Demi, and this was a deeper dive. If you have any cool stories about gaming history, let us know in the comments. I'd love to research it. I'm working hard on a Yuji Naka versus Keiji Inafune project that's sure to be a lot of fun. Again, thanks for watching.